To be released in December this year, Tom Clancy's The Division Compromised is the sequel to the Recruited novel released earlier this year. I was fortunate enough to get my hands on a review copy, and after reading through it twice, I'm going to give my own spoiler-free review. However, if you haven't read Recruited and you're planning to, I suggest switching off the video now. I won't be talking about everything that happened, but there will certainly be some parts that I'll cover that could be considered as spoilers. I'll put a link to my review of Recruited in the description. Otherwise, let's get into it. Right off the bat, you can tell that Compromised has been written in a way that doesn't require you to have any prior experience in the series. You can pick this up as a standalone novel and comfortably follow what's going on. However, in saying that, I would fully recommend reading Recruited first, as this really sets the scene with what happens in Compromised, and having a deeper understanding of what these characters have been through up until this point. As a quick recap of Recruited, located in Maryland, Myra Kanhai is a cybersecurity expert who previously served in the US Navy. When things started getting bad, she rushed over to the enlistment officers so she could do her part in helping bring the situation back under control. But when she got there, she realized it was too late. The building was dark. All she found was a man in an officer's uniform, slumped over the desk. He'd clearly taken his own life rather than succumb to the virus that was ravaging the country. It was at this point that Myra knew that all she could do was to fall back and ride out the situation at hand, to do her best to ensure that she and her younger brother could survive. They would go on to move around from building to building, district to district, in search of a safe place they could call home. Eventually they would join a community of survivors called Athena. In time, Myra's past in the Navy would become known, and much to her objection to the idea, she was placed in charge of Athena's security, protecting it from the scavengers and hostile groups who only wanted to take advantage of what was going on. Unfortunately, Myra's time of head of security led her to making some tough decisions. Some of these decisions required action for the survival of the community, but would ultimately lead to the death of members, including her own brother. This would lead to Athena community members screaming out and placing the blame on her for everything that went wrong. Speaking of unwanted distracting noise, does your house sound a little something like this? Have you had to listen to Peppa Pig for the 400th time this week?
You've got a big tummy, Daddy.
Or maybe you just want a little bit of me time to enjoy the latest episode of Love Island. Well, look no further than the Logitech G Pro X headset. In all seriousness, my friends at Logitech sent me through a pair last week, and so far I'm very impressed with them. They're extremely comfortable, and I'm legitimately hearing more in the way of in-game background sounds than I've heard previously. Plus, their compatibility with the G-Hub companion software allows for more customization options to suit your particular environment, no matter how intrusive it can be. Basically, they do a bloody good job of blocking out the stuff you don't want to hear and provide an immersive enough experience to ignore the chaos that is unfolding around you. Logitech also sent me through a stream cam, so on my other channel that I haven't really talked about yet, you'll be able to see my exhausted 3 hours of sleep a night face in full HD and 60 frames per second. Kids are great. Really. Save me. But otherwise, a big thank you to Logitech for sponsoring the video and for helping me keep some of my sanity. Anyway, where were we? Right. Myra Kanhai, collapse of society, Athena, head of security, responsible for her brother's death. One day, Athena would come under attack from a large group of hyenas. Myra knew this day could come and had prepared the community the best she could, but the sheer number of hyenas was just too much. Fortunately for Athena, there happened to be some division agents operating in the area. Just in time, they came to their aid and repelled the attackers, but would unfortunately lose one of their own in the battle. After the outbreak, the traditional way of recruiting division agents has long since passed. New recruits are now found out in the field and thrown into the deep end. After seeing what Myra had attempted to do for the settlement, the most senior agent, Brenda, saw something in her and would accept her into their cell. Myra, Brenda, and Leo would continue on with their original mission before they came across Athena, to assist the I-10 fleet of truckies who were doing their best to provide the much-needed supplies to the settlements on the eastern seaboard. The agents would learn of their northern counterparts, the Roamers, a vicious armada of raiders and bandits. But while engaging this hostile group, they would also learn of a rogue agent within their ranks, who had a grudge to settle with the division. Following on from their last mission in Recruited, the team have been left bruised and battered. Compromise begins several months after these events. While their physical wounds have more or less healed, the potential psychological scars aren't quite so easy to see or manage. After their first major mission and all of the events that led up to it, Myra Kanhai is no longer the green recruit she once was, but she still carries the survivor guilt that has plagued her since the loss of her brother and countless others she has tried to help. This isn't just a story of how they will tackle their next mission, but how they will deal with the emotional damage that has been inflicted on the team since each of them were first activated. While their previous success over the roamers brings hope to the damaged nation, it isn't long before Myra and her cell are made aware of a group of environmental extremists who are dead set on helping the world repair. Their first targets, Texan oil refineries. They want to see a world free from fossil fuels, the fuels that are also helping the truckies supply the various settlements of survivors with food and supplies. After being dispatched, they would also learn of a new private military company who are acting as the saviors, but also the overlords of these vulnerable communities. With very different goals in mind, these new factions are a time bomb waiting to explode, and the agents are caught right in the middle. Sequels can often leave a bitter taste, especially if one really enjoyed the first in the series. But I'm happy to announce that this certainly isn't the case with Compromised. If anything, I'm going to say that this is a step up from Recruited, and I'll explain why soon. Anyone who watched my review on Recruited, or even just looked at the back cover of the book, will know that I'm a fan of Thomas Parrott's writing style, but the expectations on a sequel are always substantially higher. It isn't enough to be just as good as the original. Compromised story flow is relatively similar to Recruited, but I felt a deeper connection to the facilities the agents were visiting and staying in. The factions originally felt like that they were just reskinned versions of what we've already seen in the Division universe, but ended up playing out much differently than what was expected. The relationships between agents admittedly didn't feel quite the same as Recruited, but some of the other characters were certainly more memorable. I don't think I would call this a negative, but I definitely missed a little bit of the sass and the playful banter that one character in particular brought in the first novel. One thing that I felt very early on is that Thomas seems to be finding his stride in the Division universe now. I feel like he had a bit of fun with this one. The twists and turns, while still present in Recruited, were on another tier with Compromised. But the reason I really enjoyed this, as a die-hard fan of the franchise story, is that Compromised wasn't just borrowing the Division setting, but that there were a couple of instances that really tied it together with the story that we all know and love from the games. I mean, the ending there, whew. It's disappointing that I can't or won't talk about it for a little while, because shit is starting to get interesting up in here. Sorry, April Callagher, I'm going to be looking out for other echoes in the game from here on. If you're a fan of the Division story, I see this, much like Recruited, as a must-read. Thomas does a fantastic job of building a world that has become an everyday fight for survival. The characters are well articulated to the point of forming an emotional bond with them, and the action scenes literally had my heart rate increase while I attempted to read at the same pace I imagined the events were playing out. Both novels complement the universe in a way that the games couldn't. Video games need to appeal to an audience in a different way, so it's often the case that the story suffers to a certain extent. These novels really flesh out what it's like living in this world. They also add a more human feel to the Division agents, showing their flaws, the stuff they have to go through, the damage they take, the way SHD tech works, the depth and repercussions of the decisions they have to make on the fly. I'm going to say that my only complaint is that I have to wait for the next one in the series, and for the game's storyline to catch up to the novels. You can pre-order Compromised now. I'll have a link in the description. I'm actually really looking forward to this, and will be happily adding this to my collection, although I admit I still haven't purchased myself a physical copy of Recruited yet, so I should probably get onto that now. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. I've certainly enjoyed it, and look forward to eventually being able to talk about what has been discovered in Myra's journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!